I want to share with you I can't remember if I did this the last time, but a modern rendition of the refuges. So I'll go through it twice, and please join in if you little. Well, you never know. Maybe you're singers. We'll see. So then we switch to that. Good. All right. Oh, check this out. I won this guitar at a concert, a raffle. But here it goes. I take refuge in the Buddha, the one who shows me the way in this life. Namo Buddhaya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Buddhaya. I take refuge in the Dharma, the way of understanding and love. Namo Dharmaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Dharmaya. I take refuge in the Sangha, the community of mindful harmony. Namo Sanghaya, Namo Sanghaya, Namo Sanghaya. I take refuge in the Buddha. I have been doing this Buddhism thing for 51 years. Good grief. 51 years. And it becomes more and more astounding to me. Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the Brahma Viharas, the 7 enlightenment factors. My goodness. And we, you and me, we have fallen into an actual living transmission spiritual tradition that's been around for 2,600 years. Millions and millions of people have done exactly what you're doing this morning, what I'm doing this morning. And it's not a cult of worshiping the Buddha, though I would say it's probably 95% of all Buddhists think of the Buddha as a deity. It's true in most of Asia. They pray to the Buddha and they make offerings to the Buddha. And that's not what the Buddha intended. He intended to share what he learned through his own experience about awakening, and then to share that experience so that we could all awaken. We could all suffer less and less and less to the point of suffering not at all. I am 150% certain that we can suffer less and less, and I have faith in suffering not at all. We'll see. I'm not there yet. So I was sitting here earlier this morning thinking, what could I possibly share with these people that could be useful? And one of the things that we spoke about my coming this time was that we're almost at the solstice. Days are pretty short up there now, huh? They're pretty short now. Hey, look at this nice sun coming. We're having wonderful sunny weather here in Portland for this moment. So we're coming to the shortest day of the year. It happens every year. Light, dark, light, dark. Warm, cold. And the Buddha spoke so clearly about the vicissitudes. I love that word. It's one of my favorite words, vicissitudes. My favorite Buddhist word is papancha. Do you know papancha? You know it. It's mental proliferation. It's when the mind does this. I'll have a nibble of this and then a bit of that and a bit of it, and then you're off into wonderful proliferation. And anyway, the Buddha spoke about the vicissitudes, the polarities, pleasure, pain. You know those. Gain, loss. Fame, disrepute. And they go on. Sickness, health. War, peace. Success, failure. Feeling good about myself, feeling crappy about myself. Relationship, really sweet and delicious. Relationship at war. Relationship beginning. Relationship ending. Children, healthy and not healthy. Political stability and the chaos that we're having here now, and actually in so many places around the world. I was reading just yesterday, there's several hundred tourists are trapped at Machu Picchu, that they can't get out because of the violence that's going on. And some of them are old, like me, and they were told, oh, stupid, actually, somebody told them, you're only going to be there for 2 days, so only bring 2 days worth of your medication. Now that's crazy. Anyway, they're stuck there. They're talking about helicoptering them in medication or helicoptering them out. They went on this wonderful vacation. Let's go to Machu Picchu. And it turns out to be somewhat of a nightmare. So the polarities. It's how it is, isn't it? It's utterly polarized. Our lives exist within this paradox of existence and non-existence. So normally, of course, what we do, I'll share this with you. I have the incredible privilege of having 250 gallons of 104 degree Fahrenheit water in my backyard. I have a spa. It's run on a thermostat. Most mornings, almost every morning and most nights, I come out in the back. I'm actually in a little shed in the backyard. And back at the beginning of COVID, I decided I would teach every morning, and I have since the beginning of COVID. You could join that anytime. You could find that on at portlandinsight.org. You can find the link to that. Also, robertbeatty.com has the link. Hang on just a second here. I want to adjust this picture. I don't need my picture up here. You'll be bigger. Oh my goodness. I feel like I'm in the room all of a sudden. That's much better. Hi. Oh, much better. Hello. Hello, fellow humans. What are you doing? What are you doing? Why did you get born? I mean, is this not a weird trip? Whew. Anyway, I slid into it this morning, and I was thinking about those people in Ukraine. And then I realized there are people with little babies there. I mean, that's really happening. How the hell do you take care of a newborn with no heat? I suppose you get them against your body as much as you can. But boy, this human plane is really unstable. So other than loving and maybe being generous a little bit with donations, there's not much we can do about that. But there is something we can do about our own experience of the polarities. And that is, I take refuge in the Buddha. And the Buddha was an historical figure, lived in North India, what would now be Nepal, probably. And something happened to him. He woke up. Something really big happened to him. And then he spent 40 some years teaching that something to lots of people. Though, worth noting, most people who met the Buddha were not impressed. Most people had their lives and their careers and their children and their vendettas, but a few that he said had little dust in their eyes. And those few got interested and got closer to him and to the teachings, and then had experiences themselves that led them to be more and more committed to their inward journey. So there's the refuge in the Buddha, the refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Dharma, in the teachings. And more fundamentally, however, is refuge in the way things are. And the way things are is utterly unstable, unpredictable, unforeseeable. And that's a big thing to say. I take refuge in the instability of the world. In facing it, I guess it would be more accurate. And then I take refuge in Sangha. There is one of the things I take delight in a way, and comfort, is that through my teacher, Ruth Dennison, and her teacher, Uba Khin, and back to his teacher, Lady Sayadaw, and so on, back to the Buddha, it's 120 to 140, depending upon how you count it, generations of teacher to student transmission. That's very inspiring to me, comforting. And then there's the Sangha of the practice Sangha. Right now, we are, even over this distance, it's actually quite beautiful to see you there. Even over this distance, this being together right now strengthens me. And for you being together right now really strengthens you. What a wonderful thing. And then when I take refuge in the Sangha, I like to think about the great Sangha of life, which includes the bears and the whales and the snails and all of us that are the living fabric of life right now. So, refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, strengthening. Something I have found myself talking about a lot lately is the fact that I guess I'm discovering more and more personally that meditation and the spiritual journey isn't at all what I thought at the beginning. Because I thought I was going to get control of my mind, and that I was going to be able to then make choices such that my life would be much more stable. And there's ways that, in fact, it's true. There's more concentration now. And I make a lot fewer crazy decisions blowing my life up. But it's still very unpredictable. And there's the law of karma that is totally misunderstood here in the West. We even use the wrong word. We say, "Oh, she has cancer. That's bad karma for her." That's the wrong word completely. The word is vipaka. that the circumstances in which we find ourselves are called vipaka. They're the resultants of action. And there's much more than personal karma. There's national karma. There's all these causes and conditions that are infinitely vast, and they impinge upon us in this nanosecond. And in this nanosecond, we are the manifestation of all of that. And then the question is, and where the law of karma becomes very useful, is how shall I respond to this circumstance I'm in right now? Will I freak out? Will I go dive into the lust? Will I dive into the hatred? Or can I assume that posture, not physical posture, but that inner posture of non-judgmental awareness in which I can actually be really present for what's happening, no matter what it is. And so that's not the way I came to meditation, nor the way that I practiced for a long time. Because life's so darn painful. And I wanted to control it. If I couldn't control it with meditation, then I would use alcohol or marijuana or something, or sex maybe, to control it, so I could have more and more of the pleasure side, when none of that really works. But what does work is a meditation practice in which we are cultivating the capacity to accept things as they are. Doesn't mean we do change the things we can, right? If you can and reduce suffering, why not? But there's so many things that are unstable. This is thinking of the polarities, right? The beginnings and endings of life. And so it comes down to really the nitty-gritty of what do I do in a moment of meditation? Or more fundamentally than that, what's my intention in it? So let's say, just for fun, we have this foundational practice, mindfulness of in-breathing and out-breathing. And so I can feel, I can know, awareness can receive the sense of breathing in the chest and abdomen or at the nostrils. And then I succeed, it succeeds, mindfulness is present for, let's say, a couple of breaths. Maybe let's be grand and say 5 breaths. And then something happens. It goes off. We get off into some trance state. And the trance states are, we have the 5 hindrances. Those are good old friends that we gradually transform into wakefulness. We have all the emotional states. We have the stories we tell ourselves. We have our personality stories. We have the habit of creating a past and a future, weaving thoughts and emotions together. And there's no mindfulness. The ego, is gone. Have you noticed this? Happens all the time, right? And then what happens? The Thich Nhat Hanh spoke of the miracle of mindfulness, and I think it is truly, it's miraculous, because this dream is happening, this fantasy is happening, this planning, worrying, something, or maybe it's a bliss state. This is all happening, and there's no one home. And then rather suddenly, out of nowhere, comes, boink, mindfulness. And what we tend to do then is we spin a little story, which is, oh, I just woke myself up. That's not true. It woke up all by itself. Awakening is a natural phenomenon that happens. If we create the conditions, it happens more and more and more, and then it becomes much more a part of the life stream, but the consciousness stream. So the attitude with which I approach my meditation makes a huge difference, Because if my belief is, and my attitude is, I'm going to control this mind, and if I don't control it, I'm failing, meditation really sucks. It is really disappointing. Here I am, I've been meditating over all these years, and I still have these same neurotic patterns and thoughts. My experience is the neurotic patterns that are the structure of that which takes itself to be Robert Beatty are not going away. My childhood story, my childhood infancy story has some abandonment and neglect in it. Not terrible. I was left in a hospital for 10 days because my mother was sick. And then there was conflict between the parents and a sick sister and so on. So I can tell that story. And what that does, here's this little baby who's really just, hey, hi, I just need attention. And there were some failures, some significant failures in that. And so at the time, that little baby went, it's not safe here. I can't trust. I'll get abandoned. I can walk in the house. It happened last night. I walked in the house and Jennifer was at her computer, and I went into her office and said hi, and she didn't respond. Watch my lip. Poor me. It's awful. I married the wrong person again. But that's just conditioning. That's not fundamentally who I am. That's my personality. But what am I really? I am that which is aware. And so that's a mere, what is that? That's a vipaka uprising, and how shall I respond to it? And I can respond to it by going and putting my coat away and start making dinner. Oh, and also she was home and I was working and dinner wasn't ready. I mean, that's really another blow. Aren't we strange? These expectations. So I want to bring this back to the actual practice of meditation. If we were to assume a different belief about meditation, we could be a lot happier. And that belief is, I'm going to, and this is the formal practice, I'm going to sit down now and see what's happening. I'm going to sit down with curiosity, the second factor of the 7 enlightenment factors. I'm going to be curious because I wonder how strong concentration will be now. It's the end of the day, I'm kind of tired. I wonder how strong it'll be. Or I wonder how much mindfulness there is here. I certainly need some effort, and boy, I'd really like some tranquility. I'd really love some concentration. Let's see what happens with that. And then we sit down, and life unfolds before us. And we get to observe this is something I'm really enjoying these days, which is the oscillation between awake, asleep, not asleep sleeping, but asleep lost in the trance, awake, lost in the trance, awake, lost in the trance, and what that both arises from and leads to is the term in Pali is ahimsa. Gandhi was big on ahimsa, nonviolence, and nonviolence doesn't just mean not bearing arms; it means stopping the violence within. And the violence within is any demand for anything to be a certain way, and to the degree we can allow, oh, this moment is like this, the battle stops, the dukka stops. That's the Four Noble Truths, right? There's a lot of suffering. In fact, the 5 aggregates of clinging are suffering. The body, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness, there's always this wanting something. And through stopping and paying attention to this dukka, we discover that the dukka is being caused by this wanting something. And as soon as we can soften or end the wanting something and accept it like it is, there's no more dukka. In fact, I had an experience, it's about 10 days ago. I think it really illuminates this well. Again, it was with Jennifer. She was at work. She'd left work. I was at my office, and I had a class that night, and I'd had 2 hours to prepare, and I felt pretty darn ready for the class. But she called, and she did what we tend to do, which is in the car on the way home, she was talking about her day and complaining about this and liking that, and just kind of talking on. And I got a little bored and a little irritated. And it's like, geez, do I have to listen to this? I got a class to teach. And then I've been noticing this over a few days. And so it became, I was very curious about it. So what is this? And I was watching, there was this story about blah, 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 blah. And I had nothing to do with it. And well, I don't know if that, well, I had not, anyway, something shifted. Oh, and there was also, I was aware of the personality, the liking and disliking, and the opinions and so on. And then I was aware also of Jennifer over there in the car driving. And in a nanosecond, what shifted was, I take refuge in the Buddha. It became obvious to me that I wasn't this reactivity. I was that which is aware of it. Right? Refuge in the Buddha occurred. I was that which was aware of it, and there was no more dukkha. One nanosecond to the next. Oh, what am I? I am that which knows this. And that's what one could say. I am the mindfulness. I am the heart mindfulness that knows this. And it's not a word thing like this, right? But it's a knowing. Like in this moment, I invite you to be aware that you're seeing. Isn't that an interesting shift? In one moment, there was no awareness of seeing. And then all of a sudden, there's this added piece. How did you do that? I don't know how. I do know that it happens. Or what I could say, please become aware of the life in your right hand. Suddenly, there's your right hand, and there's the life, and there's knowing it. And when you're driving the car, you can practice being aware, oh, driving the car and seeing. So what I'm hoping here is to encourage you to remember the broad picture of the deeper picture of what mindfulness really is. It's really not, mostly we mistake concentration for mindfulness. And we mistake concentration for mindfulness because it feels so darn good, right? When the mind is focused on one thing and there's no thoughts and it's just easy. Well, there's a much bigger way, a more profound way of feeling good, which is I will accept everything that's happened. And in this, there are the polarities. Let me see, I think I could do this. I have I have relatively grown children. They're 41 and 36. And they have busy lives. sometimes, sometimes they won't even text me back. Oh, that's something popped up on my screen. I don't know why that comes up. You still see me okay? Yeah, okay. They have busy lives, and here's it's the abandonment issue. Oh, there it is again, right? It's like, no response. And I have a wonderful friend, Russell Freeland. He turned 80 last week, and we did a little party. I've known him for 35 or 40 years. We did a little party last week, just the two of us. And we were talking about this thing. He has children very similar ages. And we were sort of whining to each other and also trying to be wise, And I don't know if it'll let me do it. Come on now, go out of here. Built in this. No, it's not going to do it. Let me see. Try one more time. Starting up. Dum, dum, dum. Oh, well. There it is. He was a psychotherapist for 40 years, for tremendous level of experience and training. And he said this, and I asked him to repeat it several times. And then finally I recorded it. And it was this thing about, I think of it as kind of the nature of relationships. No, it's not going to work. So I know it's very short. It goes like this. We get to be a paragraph in somebody else's life. And that is enough. That's something. We get to be a paragraph in somebody else's life, and that is enough. So in our journey through the world, we have moments of tremendous connection and life and engagement. And then inevitably, one way or another, we don't have that. And that's the nature of life, right? Everything that has a beginning has an ending. And so the training in heart mindfulness has to do with really training ourselves how to fully be here, to really live life, which includes the wonderful, pleasant times and the very difficult, unpleasant times. So is this making sense? I'm hoping it's very practical in terms of when you sit down to meditate, that we are more, that we realize that the goal is accepting the truths of anicca, dukkha, anatta, impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and not self. Rather than I'm going to get in charge, because it doesn't work to get in charge. I mean, you can briefly. It's interesting speaking with you because I have no idea what your, with a couple of exceptions, what your experience is. And so I just do what I can. There's a story. There's a story about from the time of the Buddha, and who knows about such things. One thing also to remember that I find very helpful, which is that the Buddha's teachings were passed on in an oral fashion for several hundred years. Now, it wasn't as bad as, that game telephone or telegraph that you give the same message over 10 people, because they chanted and there was a whole rhythmic mnemonic device sort of thing, and people also were not literate. So they had a different kind of consciousness. And in fact, it's still done in Burma in places that you don't get to with the monks. you don't get to do the meditation until you've memorized one volume of the Pali Canon and can chant it. Now that's pretty amazing. But the story goes like, oh, and then the teachings were written down in Sri Lanka 300 years or so after the Buddha. They were written down in Sinhala, another language, and then ultimately they were translated back into Pali, and Pali wasn't the language that the Buddha actually spoke. It was similar. So with that, all the stories, all the teachings, we're still left having to be responsible. Is it true? So anyway, there's the story of Mahamoggallana. He had two right-hand guys, and they're old men. And Mahamoggallana is the great master of psychic powers. And he can dematerialize here and materialize there and so on. And who knows about such things as that? But the story is very interesting because here he is, a great saint. He's trained thousands of people to meditate, and they've become fully enlightened like him. And thugs invaded his room and beat him within a millimeter of death. And his powers were gone. And as soon as they left him for dead, he teleported himself to the feet of the Buddha and said, "What was that?" He said, "Well, Moggallana, that was your last ripening of karma, and now you're done." Now that's a strange story, isn't it? I mean, psychic powers and blah, blah, blah. But there's no telling what's going to happen, even no matter whether we're, oh goodness, I just said it. No matter whether we're Elon Musk. Now, are we not having some strange people in the world these days in positions of power? God, I saw that one coming. Oh, jeez. Anyway, let me not get too far astray with that. So our meditation is really about practicing to be with what is. And one of the things, how often do you guys get together to meet? Is it once a month? Oh, I can't hear. Yes, okay, once a month. Your sound has gone. Oh, you're muted.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, can you give us a minute?
Right.
Yes, once a month. We have every third Saturday we get together.
Wonderful. Well, I hope you have Dharma buddies, because there's something that's really useful. Have a friend with whom you sit every day or every other day or something. And I've had quite a few people do this over the years, where they call up at 7 o'clock or whenever in the morning and say, "You ready to sit?" "Yep, I'm ready." And then they sit together for their 15 minutes or half an hour or hour or whatever. And then they ring a gong and it's like, "All right, see you tomorrow." Because that really helps with keeping us on track, that we actually do it. Because I'm hurrying. Why am I hurrying? It's such a sickness, isn't it, this hurrying? It's better. Because it encourages us to have a buddy. Have a buddy that we read. You read a book together, read a chapter a week or something. So do you have any, I know we have question and answer after a bit, but do you have any anything that's popping right now? Anybody? I just had another thread come through. If you're looking for Christmas gifts, I highly recommend. I highly recommend Mindfulness for a Happy Life. It transforms people's lives. You know, when I got the first copy from the publisher, I saw it and I liked the cover a lot. I had nothing to do with the cover. And then I turned it on Edge and I thought, 5 years, 5 years for that, but it's very distilled. But again, I want to read you a poem, but I want to speak about what it's about first. We've all experienced trauma in our lives. We've all had losses, lots of them. It's the nature of the game. Some of us have had really pretty severe trauma. And one of the things that we do in order to protect ourselves from having that experience again is we don't enter intimately into our friendships and relationships. We hold back. And what a shame. What a shame that we go to television and all the various things that we do, substances, because what we really, really want is to connect to one another. We really want to love one another. We really want to be loved. And Dharma practice, as I understand it, is really the practice of love. Not love in some smarmy way, but love in Achan Buddha Dasa, Achan Sumedho, one of my great heroes, Thai forest tradition, said at a retreat I was on once that love means there's room for everything. It doesn't mean I love you because you satisfy me in this way or that way. It means I love you because I'm really working to accept you as you are. And we can focus that on the person who sits here. And what about that? I love you exactly as you are. And then that would mean also that we even include that voice which is self-hatred. That we love that. We make room for that. That we don't reject that. We don't act on it, so our meditation becomes a willingness to accept what is in this moment. And when that's the case, gradually and over time, we make friends with more and more of ourselves, more and more parts of ourselves. And so then that means that in regular practice, sometimes I sit down and I'm feeling really terrible. Sometimes I'm lying in bed sick, and what else am I going to do other than meditate? Sometimes I feel very elated. Life is really going well for me and I get to sit. But we come back to our meditation seat with regularity, and in my hope and my experience, it grows over time. So we really want more time in meditation. It's not, no, I'm gonna learn to meditate an hour a day. It becomes, boy, I really want an hour a day at least to just be. And so in doing this, we become more accepting of that which we are with our polarities. There's sometimes that one's personality, one's health, and so on is really like the beautiful summer afternoons that I know you get in Edmonton, beautiful days. And sometimes it's like, a cold January night. But we develop the capacity, and it's quite developable, to actually be present for both, for all of it. And the poem, so it's actually the last chapter of the book. It occurred several years ago. Jennifer went to college in New Orleans, and you notice my pronunciation? I've almost got it now. They always call it New Orleans. She goes to the Jazz Fest, and with a friend of hers that she's been a friend with since preschool. And they go for a few days. Several years ago, she invited me to go with her to her sacred place, to eat at her sacred restaurants and to go to the music and so on. And we did that. And then she was going to stay for several days after, and with her friend. And we got up early in the morning before dawn, and we got in a taxi, and we went to the big hotel downtown where she got out. We both got out. We had a brief kiss, and then off I went. And then I was on the plane somewhere west of Kansas City, and I went back to the restroom, and this poem occurred on the way back to my seat. It's called 33,000 feet. People sleep, watch videos, play games on screens, and sip at wine. Flying west over snow-covered mountains, a chasm opened or perhaps just revealed itself with a taxi goodbye kiss. That moment of looking away, it's always the same, here and then not here. Those moments that we actually have when we can touch, hear, see, and smell one another are all we really have. The stakes are high, aren't they? Either we connect and love one another now, or not at all. Those moments that we actually have when we can touch, hear, see, and smell one another are all we really have. The stakes are high, aren't they? Either we connect and love one another now, or not at all. One of my students turned me on to Florence and the Machine at my last Hollyhock retreat. I'd never heard of her. What the hell? How could I not have heard of her? She fills stadiums with 30,000 people around the world. She had 10,000 of us in the Metta Center in Portland, everybody jumping with our hands in the air. It was quite wild. But anyway, I listened to that song numerous times dancing, and and then all of a sudden I heard the words. And near the end, she says, "Is this how it is? Is this how it's always been? To exist in the face of suffering and death and still keep singing?" And I thought, wow, that's what the Buddha taught. To exist in the face of suffering and death and still keep singing. To not become bitter or dead or unresponsive or selfish or greedy, but to sing our lives, to be alive. And I realized that's been an aspiration. I have the sense that I've been coming back to life my whole life, actually. And here I am, 75, and I feel more alive than I ever have. And then the second song I played, just part of it, is Carsey Blenton's song. It's the party at the end of the world. And it's the same message. That's not let's party and be mindless, but let's recognize how incredibly precious these moments and days are together. So I have a poem that I might read to share with you, and then I want to see if there are any questions. But this poem I came across rather recently. It's called Distant Regard by Tony Hoagland. If I knew I would be dead by this time next year, I believe I would spend the months from now till then writing thank you notes to strangers and acquaintances, telling them, "You really were a great travel agent," or "I never got the taste of your kisses out of my mouth," or "Watching you walk across the room was a part of my destination." It would be the equivalent, I think, of leaving a chocolate wrapped in shiny foil on the pillow of a guest in a hotel. Hotel of Earth, where we resided for some years together, I start to say before I realize it's a terrible cliche and stop. And then I go on forgiving myself in a mere split second, because now that I'm dying, I just go forward like water flowing around obstacles and second thoughts, not getting snagged and just continuing with my long list of thank yous, which seems to naturally expand to include sunlight and wind and the aspen trees which gleam and shimmer in the yard, as if grateful for being soaked last night by the irrigation system invented by an individual to whom I am quietly grateful. Outside it is autumn, the philosophical season, when cold air sharpens the intellect. The hills are red and copper in their shaggy majesty. The clouds blow overhead like governments and years. It took me a long time to understand the phrase distant regard. But I am grateful for it now, and I am grateful from my heart that I turned out to be good after all, and grateful for my mind, which in retrospect I can see I have never been sufficiently kind. Outside, it is autumn, the philosophical season, when cold air sharpens the intellect. The hills are red and copper in their shaggy majesty. The clouds blow overhead like governments and years. It took me a long time to understand the phrase distant regard, but I am grateful for it now. And I am grateful for my heart that turned out to be good after all, and grateful for my mind, which in retrospect I can see I have never been sufficiently kind, and to which in retrospect I can see I have never been sufficiently kind. Kindness. I'm still on Zoom and I'm still far away, but I feel very connected with you. It's such a privilege to meet in this way around the Dharma. Yeah. Well, I have a beautiful gong. I'm going to change my sound to be a musician sound because it picks up the gong nicely. All right, so it's now 10:20. How long do we have? We have 20 minutes. Great. Meditators, to your marks. Sit. Now, for the next 20 minutes, I want no one to move. No loud breathing. Just control yourself. Or, here we go. So please find yourself in a comfortable upright posture. If your posture becomes painful every time you sit, don't sit like that. So something very unusual, miraculous is occurring here. There's a body, a living body, and it is accompanied by consciousness. And it's at the intersection of these two that we practice. Please notice where your body touches the floor. Notice or receive the life in what you think of as your hands. And notice if you really pay attention, you don't find hands, do you? That's a word or an image. What you find is sensations. And something really momentous happened a few years ago. Your parents came together in a very strange way. And the dance of DNA started. And then you were born. And then at the moment of your birth, there was a big transition because your mother could no longer breathe for you and you took your first gasping breath. And since then, you've never stopped. If you stopped for very long, you'd have severe brain damage or you'd be dead. And this continues till now and will continue until the moment of your death. So the Buddha taught the very first meditation after the practice of gratitude, generosity that the Buddha taught, was mindfulness of in-breathing and out-breathing. And this doesn't require, it quite specifically does not require you to change your breath in some way. Instead, it invites you to allow your breath to breathe itself. To notice how each breath has a beginning, a middle, and an ending. And we're attending to the actual sensations in the body, in the chest and abdomen, or maybe at the nostrils, as breathing in and breathing out happens. Now, here's where that question that I started with arises. What's my intention here? What's my purpose? It could be I'm going to control the mind and I'm going to get concentrated on the breath and I'm going to enter a very pleasant trance state. I've done that before and it's very satisfying for a while. And so then as we sit here, the mind will wander, and there's a certain sense of failure. And then the papancha, the mental proliferation can happen. The mind wanders, and then there's this story. It's like, oh no, I can't control my breath. I'm sure everybody else can do this better than me, and I always fail in my life, and this is one more thing that's blah, 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 on it goes. What to do if that's happening? Simply notice, oh, there's the wandering mind. There's the obsessing mind. There's the self-hating mind. You don't need to fight it. You don't need to counteract it in some way. You just realize it's exactly parallel to fluffy white clouds on a summer day in the sky. They're just thoughts. They're just thoughts, and they are not worthy of a resistant attention. Or even, they're also not worthy of wrapping up in them. They're just thoughts. And then come home to this next in-breathing and out-breathing. And so the practice is profoundly gentle, utterly gentle. we come home to the sensations of breathing and land on the breathing with the delicacy that's like a butterfly landing on a flower. And in time, the breath becomes more and more poignant and powerful and interesting. It's a beacon. And then you discover again that the mind has wandered again. How normal. Fortunately, you don't have to stop it. Awareness illuminates it, and then you can come home to breathing. Perhaps you discover that the wandering mind is very predominant. Maybe only every few minutes do you awaken from that wandering mind. That's perfect practice. Those moments of awakening are the real thing. There's a saying in the teachings that it could have been dark in a cave for thousands of years. When a candle lights it up, the darkness of that 1,000 years is banished. And so as you sit, notice the moments of awakening. And it could be, of course, that your body gets painful. If that persists, then you turn toward the sensations of pain as your secondary object. You learn that these sensations begin and end. So we have this rising and falling. You might like to use mental notes, actually. Rising, rising, falling, falling. When the mind wanders, you can note wandering, wandering. And then gently returning. It's all about gentle. It's about love. There's room for everything. When asked one time for his most succinct teaching of how to proceed, the Buddha said, "Try to live in the present moment." And so with absolutely no violence or coercion, notice this breath that exists in this present moment. Notice the wandering mind of this moment. Notice the concentration of this moment. And we could go on in this way for a long time or a short time. The length of time really doesn't matter so much, it's that we actually do it. Because there's only now to do it in. And now to change gears, kind of in preparation for ending this brief time together in practice, please become aware of your buttocks where they press against the floor, the cushion, the chair. Become aware of your chest and heart. And open up to your experience of your life and acknowledge how difficult it's been. There's been beautiful times, I'm sure, of course. But there's also been a lot of really hard times and disappointing times because that's life. And you can just remember back, this is a very brief touch into this, but remember back into some time in your life when you've really had a big loss or disappointment. And notice how you naturally might turn to loving yourself. It's like, oh boy, whew, that was a heavy one. And you might wish yourself well. There's a beautiful practice, very simple. It's a mantra, and the mantra goes like this: I love you, and put your own name at the end. I love you. And if that's difficult, that's very interesting and useful information. That shouldn't be difficult. You're a one-of-a-kind ever being in the universe. And so, I love you with your name at the end. And in a very Buddhist way, we might remember that our lives are time limited. That which we are is not time limited, but the life of this body and personality, we exist in time. And so eventually, we will leave this body and our friends and family and everyone all behind. All of our achievements, struggles. If we remember this, how can we be anything but loving? How can we be anything but loving? And please now, bringing awareness into your hands, the aliveness of hands, the aliveness of your chest and throat, the aliveness of your eyes, your chest, your cheeks, your forehead. And you might think of some blessing phrase like, may I be happy. You might do that on the in-breath, may I be happy, and on the out-breath, may all beings be happy. The idea is simply to remember to love yourself. And now doing whatever's necessary in order to allow the eyes to open, but don't let them pop open. Notice it takes some work. And then the miraculous seeing happens. Seeing. And now, to the degree that you're comfortable with it, holding that thought, remembering your own life and the preciousness and temporary nature of it. The same is true for every other person in that room. Everyone in that room is struggling Life is very confusing and difficult for everyone. And to the degree that it's comfortable enough for you, I invite you to look around and to see one another. Maybe make eye contact. This is a person who will someday say goodbye to everyone and everything that they love. Don't go beyond your comfort level, but remembering this, as my teacher Rina Sirkar said, how can we be anything but loving? Right? How can we be in such a hurry? So, this is a practice one can do anywhere. Maybe I'll leave you with a funny little story. I flew in from Vancouver to Portland one time. My baggage hadn't made it onto my plane. It was going to come on a flight about 2 hours later. So I was schmoozing with a young woman who worked in the baggage area. We had a nice time. And then she said, I've never met anyone in 5 years doing this who was so relaxed about the fact that his bags didn't come. And I said, well, we're having a nice time, aren't we? This is kind of like a party. But then I was bold. It was the end of a retreat, and I was really wide open. And I said, well, I actually have a secret practice that I do that makes things really different and makes the circumstance easy. And I said, you want to know how I do it? And she said, yeah. And I said, well, it's very weird. And she said, come on, I want to hear it. And so I said, well, we're at the baggage carousels, right? There's a lot of people. And I whispered to her, everyone here is going to die. And she looked around and said, that does change things, doesn't it? And I have a dear friend, actually a next generation teacher trainee whose name is Vikram, and he's Indian. He's very dark skinned. And I told this story once when he was there, and he said, well, that's not a story I would tell in an American airport because I'm getting But it's true, I do that. It's so stabilizing. It's like, oh wow. Why would we not be loving? So I want to repeat one thing, which is if your sitting posture always results in your being uncomfortable sitting, sit in a chair. I gave up and moved to a chair years ago. And I've noticed, I haven't been on retreat, but Jack Kornfield and Joseph Goldstein, they're all sitting in chairs. Now they're older, but awakening has nothing to do with whether one is cross-legged or this or that. It has to do, it's a mind phenomenon. If sitting cross-legged really works, great. But if it doesn't, it's not more spiritual than sitting in your chair. I'm actually in a rocker here. You can probably see it's part of the. It's a one of those balance chairs. My physical therapist said to get this, and it's great. Well, I'm a little over time. I want to not take too much time. So thank you all for the invitation, and thank you, dear Jane, for bringing me here originally the first time. Lovely to be with you. Oh, I guess I have one more piece of practical advice. You ready? Dance every day. Dance every day. Dance. I mean that the song, the first song I played. I dance to that every morning. And I've got headphones, so Jennifer doesn't need to be bugged by it. But I fly around the living room, and it changes my mood. It's like it reminds me, yes, is this how it is? Right? Is this how it's always been, to exist in the face of suffering and death and still keep singing and dancing? So there you are. Thank you very much. I'm going to leave you now.